I'm back. Week 3, video 3. We are going to start on central nervous system development. So we have conception. The egg and the sperm meet. We have cell division. All that stuff happens at the very first. Week 1, a blastocyst forms. Week 2, the blastocyst implants in the uterine wall. Week 3, a neural plate forms, which is the beginnings of the spinal column and that spinal canal that holds the spinal cord. And cells in that area become specific to the nervous system. So they're not going to be fat cells or toenail cells or anything like that. They're going to be part of the nervous system, and that's differentiated by the 3rd week after conception. Week 4, a precursor, the neural tube, or the precursor of the central nervous system is developed. The inside becomes the spinal cord and the cerebral ventricles, which are up in our brains, and we'll talk about later in this chapter. The outer layer becomes various portions of the brain. So what's important here with neural tubes, if you heard about folic acid being added into the supply, and that pregnant women are supposed to take folic acid, that is to prevent neural tube defects, which is usually what is known as spina bifida. And so usually that is that there is an opening, usually the base of the spine. I mean, it can be anywhere, but that's why we do folic acid when we're pregnant, is for neural tube defects. And that's very, very early in gestation, so it's a very important time. Then after kind of week 4, we go into embryonic growth. The ectoderm becomes the nervous system, sense organs, and skin. So ecto is outer, right? Mesoderm, middle, meso, becomes the excretory system, muscles and blood. So kind of big time in the system, but not on the outside, not on the very inside. And then we get to the endoderm, the very core inside, which becomes our internal organs. The disruption of the normal cell process because of environmental factors or stress or trauma can severely affect normal cell development during prenatal stages. So when I used to work at the Centers for Disease Control and Developmental Disabilities, and I would, kind of look at all these books of things that went wrong, the medical journals, and then reading all the files of the students with disabilities, but then also talking to my friends with, typically developing children. It is so complex. Making a human and the stuff that goes in it is so complex. It just boggles my mind that it goes well, I think, more often than it doesn't. So it is such a complex, just fascinating process to me. It's super cool. And especially considering what our brains do for us and how complex they are, it's just amazing. Okay, so moving on to brain division. So we have the gray matter versus the white matter. To remind you that what causes or what creates the white matter, if you said myelin, you are correct. But we're going to start with gray matter. So it is comprised of neurons, cell bodies, dendrites, capillaries, and glial cells. And we'll get to glial cells later, but they're like the scaffolding that the other cells kind of climb up and get to where they need to be in the brain. It's really cool. It does not contain myelinated axons, which we said are what? White matter. Gray matter is necessary for cognitive abilities like memory, language, emotional responses, sensory abilities, and gray matter is associated with cognitive performance in the areas of executive functions, memory, and attention. And we talked about executive function a little bit last week. And again, that's the things that's inhibitory responses, getting started on stuff, organization, all kinds of things that you kind of need to keep going, starting things, finishing things, planning for things, all kinds of neat stuff like that. Next is white matter, which is what? Myelinated axons. That's right. That are between areas of the brain. And so I was having a hard time with what's the cerebrum, because people keep talking about the cerebrum, like what is that? So the cerebrum, which I'm probably jumping ahead, is the squiggly part of the brain, the stuff that you think about with the sulci and the gyri and the stuff that you think about when you see a brain. So the brain is composed of the cerebrum, which is our white matter, right? Then the cerebellum, which is back there, the diencephalon, which is way internal, and the brainstem. And so white matter sends signals to and from various areas of the cerebrum, squiggly part, and controls the distribution of information across the brain. So just making sure that it's where it needs to go. Like I said, it's the axon, the white stuff that's helping things go by quickly, and that's our learning, all that great stuff. It is affected in brain trauma. And so, like we said, that there's the demyelination that happens sometimes with aging, dementias, and that sort of stuff. Obviously, if there's trauma, it can affect the myelin in the brain as well. And the white matter's volume is correlated with learning, because I've also said, right, that as there's more learning, there's more myelin, more white matter. Next, we're going to go to hemispheres. There is a video for this called the left brain versus the right brain myth. That we're not either using one or the other, we're using both. And so, you say, oh, I'm right brained or left brained, you're both brained, both hemispheres. There is definitely very complex interaction between the hemispheres. There is some lateralization, which means sort of like a specialized area. So language abilities do appear to be more prominent in the left hemisphere, and spatial abilities are more prevalent in the right hemisphere. Okay, so there is a little bit of some lateralization in some things. And lateralization is the tendency for some neural functions or cognitive processes to be specialized to one side of the brain or the other. And it's most obvious in people with lateralized, so specialized area seizure activity, who have focal or like specific limitations, because then you can obviously see with that discharge of that electricity and kind of messing up the electrical patterns of some spot in the brain, you see, oh, that was definitely the left side or whatever, right? And the seizure, folks with seizures or those kinds of seizures. The right hemisphere controls motor functions of the left side of the body, and the left hemisphere controls the right. The other thing while we're talking about myths with left brain, right brain, that I also wanted to throw in there is that there's a conception of we only use X% of our brains, 10%, 30%. That is not true. We use all of our brains all the time. So full brain all the time. Next brain part is the cerebellum. It is located behind the brainstem and sometimes called the little brain. It's beneath the cerebrum. The squiggly part is what I'm calling it, right? But above the brainstem, which comes in, that goes down into being your spinal cord. It's important for sensory and motor skills and balance. And so if you have an injury, down low here, it will probably affect your motor functioning and your balance. It is also important for memory, learning, and emotional functioning. And it receives information from a bunch of pathways. Next up is the corpus callosum, and it's sort of like the highway. It's shaped, I guess, like a little bit like that, that connects the hemispheres. And so how big yours is or little it is the as fast as things can get in between each other, of the hemispheres. I don't know if they still do this now, but I know that in the past, at least, that sometimes when you have seizure activity that is uncontrollable by other methods, and it's going between the hemispheres, is they can cut the corpus callosum, which means that your hemispheres aren't going to be able to communicate with each other, at least in that way. Here's my little aside. Rumor has it that Einstein did not have a corpus callosum and that his two hemispheres were just together, and that's why he had, so many great ideas, because everything was just firing, but that is not true. And in fact, when he died, and I'm going to read this straight off, not only did he have one, but it was apparently an awesome one. They said not only was it thicker than the vast majority of subregions of the vast majority of most of the parts of the corpus callosi in 15 elderly healthy males. It was also thicker at 5 key crossings in those of 52 young healthy men in the primes of their lives. So his corpus callosum did allow him to really think of things quickly and efficiently. Next are, glial cells. And like I said, those are the ones who assist neurons by holding them in place, supplying them with nutrients and oxygen, assisting in repairing damage to the nervous system, and insulating neurons from each other. They act as the scaffold of the brain. So like I said, in brain formation, that's the scaffolding that the other little neurons and stuff are using to climb to where their spot's going to be in the brain. All right, that is a good place to stop for our next video. I will see you in video 4.